what's out there, and this should really be a primer, so any accountant, any of our members should be able to pick up from this and have an idea of what's happening, and then figure out where you want to dig into more detail. So with that said, I'm going to move forward. First question, future of finance and accounting. On the screen, there's a picture. How many people know what that picture is? It's rhetorical for those of you on the webinar. I'm looking at the people in the room. They're all shaking their head. Has anybody actually used one of these or seen somebody use one? It's just me then, I'm the old guy. So when I started out, these were comptometers, and we had actually a couple of ladies in the office we worked at, and they were really good because they could add numbers up quicker than anyone, even probably quicker than an electronic calculator, which is why they hung around for a little bit longer. What really finished them off, though, was the personal computer, right? Oh, calculators might have had something to do with it. My point by saying that is that technology and the pace of change has been accelerating not just the last 20, 30 years, but the last 100+ years. So we have computing, we've got networking, because if you remember, if you go back to 1981, when the PC came out, I think it was around 1981, you know, it had a 10 megabyte hard drive. 10 megabyte hard drive, that was phenomenal. And guess what? The XT came out, was it the XT a few years later? It had a 20 megabyte hard drive. And things got faster. Floppy disk drives, 5 1/4 inches and 3.5, yeah. I used to, great times. So we've moved forward. Guess what? We've got the internet, we've got storage, big data, cloud, smartphones, all this new stuff coming along. Now, alongside this, bear with me, we've seen the growth of accounting software and enterprise reporting systems. So there's some significant enablers which will further disrupt the mechanics of our profession. So let me give another example. If you go back to, actually, let me find my cell phone, right? Cell phone, I assume most people have one of these, right? So there is more computing power on this cell phone that costs, what, about $500, than you could get on a mainframe computer back in, probably still in the 1990s, right? And so what's happened is that the cost of storage, the cost of memory has reduced dramatically, right? So think about an ERP system. When it started off, what was scarce? Well, storage and memory. Do you remember people used to write code very carefully to cram things into the least space so that it could be efficient? We split things up. We had accounts receivable file in one place, accounts payable in another place. We had the general ledger. We had files in different places that all interconnected. Why didn't we put them all in one place to start off with? And the answer is we had limited memory, we had limited storage, we had to make do with what we've had. Today, if we move ahead to something like, it's not here at the moment, but if you look at something like blockchain, there's no reason you can put everything in one place and have it all seamlessly integrating, and you wouldn't need the reconciliations that people do. But we can't do that, I think, for no other reason than, you know, things like the SEC, who at least currently like the way we've always done things. Any questions from the room before I move forward? You're all looking, well, you're all looking astonished. So you can't see the guys in the room, but they're all smiling, they're happy. Oh my God, they want to give rounds of applause, but I'm holding them back, right? Okay, so the future again, finance and accounting, ethics and trust. What sets us apart from anybody else? Well, we're all professional accountants and we all have professional standards. People know they can trust us because that's part of what we do. That's part of what's embedded in our qualification as CPAs, chartered accountants, right? So that's our qualification. That's why people hire us in to be auditors. So we can be accountants, controllers, CFOs, auditors, consultants, entrepreneurs, CEOs, or partners, right? So our profession has now got this change opportunity coming along with new enablers, new skills. How do we maintain and update our standards, our principles, and our beliefs to not just stay current, but to seize opportunities to grow ourselves, right? And I'll cover that more in slides coming up. So if you're a CFO, and we have some CFOs in the room, or people, former CFOs, right? Where's the pressure on you at the moment? Well, 3 things. You've got long-term, doing things slowly, incrementally, just doesn't cut it anymore, right? So that we've summarized as digital disruption. There's a whole focus on digitizing everything. And digitization is simply doing things electronically. So rather than sending in an invoice that you manually key into a system and make errors with, you send in a file that has that information already stored on it, and you automatically load it into your system and reduce any errors because it's all matching the fields that you've got set up in the system. And if it doesn't, it will tell you, right? So an example could be of digital disruption. Think of, well, you can see the logo, right? Amazon, bought Whole Foods not so long ago. I mean, they're doing a lot of disruption. They're going out and transforming cost structures everywhere, and they're allocating resources to focus on analytics. And I assume also Amazon will be looking at cognitive or advanced artificial intelligence. Item 2, business as usual, the way we've always done things, is not an option, right? So geopolitics, right? We have a president in the United States who's been here in power for just over a year now, and he made it very clear when he came in that he didn't want jobs from America going offshore, right? So if you're in the outsourcing industry, are you really going to say, hey, we're outsourcing all these jobs offshore, Mr. President? And there are clients that I've worked with who've actively turned down speaking engagements and not done that because they didn't want to break any waves and be pointed at as the big bad person in the room, right? The fact that moving those jobs would move away anywhere is beside the point, right? So the pace of innovation is increasing, and we're adopting agile methods to do design, pilot, and iterate new solutions. Third item, no sacred cows. Anything can be considered. So here I'm summarizing it as activist pressures, right? You've got people like Carl Icahn, and they come up and say, hey, we're putting pressure on you. You're not performing. We want to split you up, and so that we can actually make more money off the bits of you that aren't doing so well, right? And that's hit companies like Unilever, etc. in the last year. So all facets of the operating model need to look at how they can better work with digital technology. So carrying on from the last slide, this is to flip over. Digital disruption, I gave the example of Amazon, and I'm just saying that here, digital can be a sword that cuts both ways. And what I mean by that, it's not just what you do to your, it's the whole ecosystem that you work with, right? So it's clients, consumers in the sector, everybody at a senior level, which is anybody, any senior accountant needs to be aware of the impact of digitization, and even more, the impact of not digitizing. Geopolitical we talked about, and jobs on and offshore, and we talked about performance pressures and acquisition. You'll find that I'll sometimes say things from slides ahead of me and then think, oh, I meant to say that later, but bear with me, I'm not going to say it twice, at least not too often. So the changing role of the CFO. Paul, wake up. Okay, no, he's just blinking, that's fine. He's smiling at me now anyway. So the changing role of the CFO. Tempestuous times. Things are being disrupted, a lot of turbulence, new competitors. So who is better positioned to help enterprises other than CFOs and finance professionals, right? 80% of finance teams expect to use analytics to drive performance, manage risk, compliance, and optimize processes within the next 2 years. And about half of finance organizations, this is from the IBM C-suite study, about half of finance organizations plan to implement cognitive computing, artificial intelligence within the next 2 years, and nearly 2/3 within 5. There's a link on this slide to the report. If you want, you can get this presentation from the drop down that Sasha has put down with this presentation. Okay, so I'm pulling up one slide to show how CFOs feel, right? The gaps between importance and effectiveness. So if you look at this, you can see the different color codings, what's effective and what's important. And so clear ones up there. I'm going to focus on driving integration of information, developing talent, and that's where we come back to. If we're developing talent in finance, that's not just on us as accountants and chartered accountants, CPAs, about how we develop ourselves, it's how we develop the people who work with us, right? What we also want to do is identify and track new revenue growth opportunities, because there's a big opportunity out there to harness new ways of making money, right? What's the value of your data comes to mind. How much is your data worth? If people knew that, we'd be able to put a price on it. We don't. We just know we've got this mound of data and it's valuable, but we haven't quite figured out how to monetize it yet. Once we start to figure that out, it becomes even more valuable. And that's where companies like Amazon, Facebook, who sit on vast quantities of data, are going to be able to leverage what they've stored about people's behaviors to help drive and better market things to them. And you're seeing that already with the annoying little ads that pop up trying to sell you something that you looked at 3 weeks ago and then didn't want to see again, but so far they remember you want it and come back. Going forward, they might figure out you don't want that and then try and show you something that you really do want that you don't know you want yet, which would be huge. I got a smile in the room for that, and thank you. Okay, so you can see the other ones on there. We also want to look at optimizing, planning, budgeting, forecasting. So accountants, what's the impact on us? So increasingly, CFOs are moving outside of traditional finance roles. We have somebody in the room here who was not just a CFO, he was also a COO. Isn't that right, Mark? Thank you, Mark's nodding his head. We have other members of our profession who are CEOs. So I think the C-suite in general, or where leadership is required in a company, the CFO is also usually the most valuable adjunct to the CEO. And what we're seeing is more and more CFOs have got the capability, because of the knowledge they've got from the organization in detail, to move into other areas and have a much more dramatic impact on driving business forward. So other things, automation and moving towards artificial intelligence. Hey, that's going to lead to lower demand for auditors. Well, yes, probably it will. And we're already seeing that. We did a panel event in New York last year at the Cornell Club, and Natasha Holbeck, who's a audit partner in Deloitte and our vice president for ACORS at the moment, she was there and she spoke about this. And we're seeing that the big firms are picking up less graduates than they used to when we or others more recently came through the system, and they're also focusing more on different skills. So now maybe we want people with a data analytics background, right, rather than somebody who's done social sciences, for example. Not that there's anything bad in that, it's just that you need to look at the skills that are in demand to take these data sets and put more value add on how we analyze them and add value back into the business. So there are specialists who are in demand, and what we're seeing with outsourcing certainly is as you shift to automating basic tasks, like digitizing your accounts payable so they come in one file and automatically flow through the process, right? If you do that, then guess what? What you need is higher value staff who can actually then add more value back into the business. One of our members, I was on a panel with him up in Chicago in November, and we talked about this. And for his company, he was saying that even though the staff cost is highest in the United States, the actual value they're seeing is way higher because they've got automation, they've also got good processes, which means they may be able to deliver, say, an accounts payable invoice for $1 an invoice, rather than in Asia, maybe that's coming through at $5 an invoice at the moment. Okay, so the other need, and I know we have some people on this call who've done this, is strong transformation leadership, right? To embrace technology and not fear it. And that, I've talked to members who've been scared about I don't know what blockchain is. People will worry, I don't know what I'm talking about it. Well, actually, all you need to do is spend 10 minutes understanding it. And as an accountant, you'll then get what it can do. You don't need to know the details. You just need to be aware that it's something that can help transform business, and then look for where the opportunity is and partner with somebody who can help you look at it further if that is necessary. So the next bit is all about value and trusted advisors. I'm sure you've read to it. And focusing on data analytics and impacting traditional audit work is another one. We're seeing more and more. I think audit is going to change in future. Not just external audit, but internal audit, because what you're going to have is a higher degree of automation. You're going to look at the whole process that you're auditing, and you're going to look for where the anomalies are, rather than doing statistical sampling, because we've always done statistical sampling, right? And I think that's going to mean there's going to be a much greater focus on adding value back in, so that the auditors can actually come up with recommendations based on their analysis that could add value to the business, rather than just saying the business is doing okay. Anybody disagree with me on that? Looking around, nods, thank you. There we go. They're a vocal bunch here today. I'm going to have to ask them some questions in a moment. So I covered some of this just in the last talk, and that is the future of auditing. Audits still need to be done, right? Auditors still need to be trusted. And guess what else is changing? There's more and more globally now. You're finding that countries are looking at, well, maybe we should swap over auditors more frequently, right? So that's going to stir things up a little bit, and maybe not so much for competition, but it's going to blur the lines between having a trusted advisor who's always there for you to now having to swap that trusted advisor periodically, and unless you have somebody who would move from one audit firm to another to maintain the relationship with you, which I guess that would come into question as well, it could be trickier to do, right? So the tools that we're talking about are going to require different skills, and that's what we need to focus on. Technology, I'm sure you've read there, it'll help us better understand clients. And a bit about deeper insights, I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about value add. We're talking about taking a client's data and the way that they're performing and analyzing and assessing performance so that clients can make improvements. And guess what? That could help move audit from a cost of doing business to adding business value. So let me now focus on talent and skills. And this is the bit you were waiting for, right? What's the impact on our profession? Well, if you look at the list we've got here, these are all things, and if you don't know what they all are, look them up, right? Because these are the things that, and there's others out there as well. This is just the ones that first come to mind, right? But I think we're going to see the CFO becoming the chief analytics officer, if they're not already doing that. We're going to see digital reinvention. That was a big push about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Everything should be digitized, right? That feeds into robotics, automation. Everybody goes, oh, automation's new. It's not new, right? I mean, I was with Starwood Hotels, you know, was it 15, 16, 17 years ago here in Boston, and we implemented 100 shopping bots to go out over the internet, pull back competitive rates from our competitors, put them into a database to have a report on the revenue manager's desk the next day, right? Okay, that cost millions of dollars. Now you can get that as a commodity. Point being, automation isn't new. What's new is the cost has come down with some of the providers, that it's now cost effective to replace a person doing something, even if that person happens to be in India or Asia, with having a robot doing it. And then the focus is the process itself, because there's no real gain from automating a bad process, right? Yes, you reduce the person cost, but it's way more efficient to look at that process and make it work more efficiently for you. Okay, next things, we've got advanced analytics. They've always been there, predictive analytics. Prescriptive, cognitive computing or advanced intelligence. That's coming more and more. We've seen a lot happening with chatbots. It's going to get more pervasive. As artificial intelligence is only as good as what it's fed. So the more data you feed it, the more it can refine what it's basing its recommendations on, the better it can become at predicting and adding value. And that's a work in progress. Whether it comes through realistically in 6 months or 6 years, people are working on it at the moment. And as we saw from the previous slide, a lot of people are expecting it to start to pay dividends. Blockchain, IOTA. So blockchain, you've got a block, you've got another block. It's in a chain, right? What more can I say? I'll come back to it on a later slide. IOTA I'm mentioning because Daniel and I were talking with one of our other members here last month, and it's a similar concept. The difference there is it most goes from node to node, but then you lock the node down. So different variations on a similar sort of technology, which is best for the business. So the analogy we always use, and you've heard this before, is it's a bit like VHS and Betamax, right? At the start, you didn't know which was going to win. As soon as VHS won, everybody said, oh, Betamax, why would you go there? But it was the better technology, right? Cloud. Everything's in the cloud now. I would argue that Oracle is losing their direction a little bit at the moment because they're focused everything on cloud computing, right? And in practice, they're in the cloud. They're maybe not so focused on selling their financial systems. Maybe SAP is focused, oh no, let's sell financials and general ledger, and isn't so focused. So you've got to look at which vendors are supporting the products that you want to use, right? Cybersecurity is a topic on its own, and we may do a future webinar on that at a later date, but security is key, right? I remember I was talking to a client in Jamaica a number of years ago, and she asked me, she said, David, should I be looking at moving from an on-premise data center to doing something in the cloud? And at the time I said, well, probably not, because you're on an island and you've got, you know, infrastructure and all the rest of it, and then you've got security. Today, I think security in the cloud is probably now better than having it on premise, because what's the number one risk you've got for somebody hurting your operations? It's usually, or not usually, it's often an employee or somebody who's disgruntled who's got access to those systems. If you're using an independent party in the cloud with their own security around it, that should lessen the risk. And then the final item there, if you haven't heard the words, is design thinking. And that's where you rebase your assumptions, go back, figure out what the real issues are, and put people in a room so you can't recognize who's the consultant and who's the client, and they come up with a mutually agreed plan for how to then attack the main objective that they come up with they want to solve. Any questions from the room? How am I doing on time, Daniel? Okay, thank you. Good. So moving forward. Oh, see that? Yeah, clicked it twice. You have to bear with me. Okay. So professionals everywhere need to reimagine the ways they work, right? And this, I put this up here because I like the next line. It's one that one of my colleagues at IBM likes using, and that is AI, artificial intelligence, is helping make the ordinary extraordinary. Now, what do we mean by that? It's the concept of superhuman, right? And by that, I don't mean Clark Kent. Well, I could, but I'm not in this instance. What I mean by that is if you take an athlete and they're, let's say, Gareth Bale or Lionel Messi, right? People would recognize they're great football players, right? I can say that in this audience, right? And they're probably superhuman compared to your average player. But actually, if you look at it, what makes them superhuman is that little bit of difference. They're that fraction of a second quicker, and they've got that little bit more awareness to get to where they need to be, and they read things that bit better. So with a little bit more effort, they move from being ordinary to being superhuman. That is what artificial intelligence can do for ordinary humans. It can give any ordinary human an edge by giving it that extra lift that turns them into being a superhuman, or as in here, somebody who is extraordinary. Okay, so transformation through automation and artificial intelligence. So organizational maturity, okay, I've been through that. Cognitive technologies we've touched on. 80% of the most effective finance organizations say that cognitive computing, AI, is going to be important. That was on an earlier slide as well, so I'm probably actually saying it twice here, but businesses are saying in the surveys that are being done that this is important to them. So if it's important to them, then you need to figure out it's either important to you or it's important to you to find out enough about it so that you can make an informed decision. And that, coming back to our CFOs, it's the same theme. Driving commonality with data, processes, technology, standardization, governance, and rationalization. Okay, so this automation continuum is from IBM, and it was published at the end of last year in tandem with an automation white paper. The link to that is in the appendix to this document, so you can pull that down and read it if you want. But it's looking at three things, right? Because there's been lots of things coming out there, and usually it's best to have things in threes, because more than that, it gets difficult to remember, right? So you've got basic automation. Who can tell me what basic automation is in the room? Excel spreadsheets. Well, it could be. It's data analysis that would fall into that, but it's really resolving things by triggering events, getting structured data, humans executing them, maybe using Excel. So it's basic. Excel macro would be a great example of a basic piece of automation where you press a button and it does 20 keystrokes in a second. Right? Everybody familiar with that? They had to say yes to that. So advanced automation is where you start attaching artificial intelligence. So combining that with humans, you can address exceptions, because automation takes care of most of the work. It throws out exceptions, you address the exceptions. As you add in artificial intelligence, it starts analyzing that and making recommendations on what you can do. So multiple systems are working together, and at the end of the day, you get insights and recommendations. And then what you truly call intelligent automation, right, is where the AI elements take the lead. It's infused in everything, and it makes autonomous decisions, and it self-remediates, which means it learns and corrects itself. And it does analytics across all data. So it could be from moving from just one AI working on something to multiple AIs working together to analyze a large problem. And it's where we're headed. The key is, how quickly do people embrace this, and where do we see the payback, and how does it come through, right? So for that, I'm going to go a little bit into what cognitive computing is. Bear in mind, cognitive computing is artificial intelligence. The reason for the words are, IBM brought up cognitive as a name and threw it out there as trying to brand everything as cognitive, but they found very quickly that most of their customers and clients didn't know what cognitive meant and referred to everything as artificial intelligence. So you've seen a switch back more recently, and people are now saying AI, even though they're still using the word. So it's the same thing. There's 4 things you need to know to understand cognitive computing, and I'll give you a clue. They're on the screen in front of you, right? So the first thing is to understand. So to be a true artificial intelligence, it needs to understand what it's being told, right? Structured, unstructured data. It needs to reason. It needs to take the data and infer and extract ideas. It needs to learn. As it gets new information, it needs to iterate, interact, and refine what it's doing and continue its learning process. And then interact. It needs to be able to see, talk, and hear and interact with humans in a natural way. And you're seeing a lot of this at the moment in where you've most seen it is with chatbots, right? Where somebody's asking you questions or you're getting prompted by a robot. I'll give you an example. IBM's got a client that they deal with, a CPG client, and that client's got a help desk. Help desk is sitting there. It used to have multiple help desks in multiple languages. Now there's one help desk, and it's in English, right? But what happens is people will ask a question in, say, Spanish. It'll get translated. It'll come through. The help desk person will respond to it in English. It'll get translated, and it will be received back in Spanish. At the same time, there's an artificial intelligence component that's seeing what's coming in, and it's checking the conversation and checking how it parallels other conversations that it's experienced already and what it's learned, and it's making recommendations to the analyst or the help desk person so they can make a better recommendation back. And that's where you're seeing 30–40% benefit. Say hello. Good evening, Emma. Welcome.
Good evening.
You're about halfway through, so just bear with us. I'll get you to watch the recording later, right? So becoming a cognitive enterprise requires a thoughtful strategy. So some examples of what you can do here, right? I mentioned it earlier. You can do a design thinking strategy. The purpose of that, or whatever other thing you want to do, what you want to do is establish a vision and build a framework for a journey, right? And once you've got that built, you can then build out a business case, because we're accountants, we like business cases, right? So what we want to do is say, okay, this is the cost benefit of doing this, this is the expected outcomes, right? Then you can, if it's appropriate, you can see, well, what's my cognitive or my artificial intelligence environment? And that comes people, process, and technology. So you put all that into the mix. You then need a proof of concept, right? Execute a pilot, show it works, right? Then if it does, you can deploy it and scale it. And then behind all this, there's 2 very important things that we as accountants like. One is ethics. We need to have a purpose, right? The purpose of artificial intelligence is not to take over what humans do and tell them what to do, right? You might think that if you watch lots of sci-fi, right? It's to augment human intelligence and help humans deliver better outcomes, right? And then transparency and trust. How do we keep that in place? Well, you've got to know who trained your artificial intelligence, right? So it's probably better to go to an established vendor where you can trace the pedigree of how they've tested and built up the data sets that are fueling the AI that is now working with you, rather than buying a cheap one from the guy on the corner who says he found it in Russia, right? Because you never know what would happen. And then comes back to our other theme, which is skills. Touching on outsourcing, I mentioned earlier outsourcing is changing. So to go back, what I mean by that, it used to be labor arbitrage. What labor arbitrage is, you take jobs from country A, you move them to country B, same work can be done cheaper. Bad thing there is that often meant bad processes got moved from A to B, so you've still got the bad process, it just takes less time to do it, right? The other interesting thing is that most of the world's accounting professionals are involved with or touch the outsourcing industry. It's a huge figure. I can't remember what it was, I did know. And so if we're looking at changing the outsourcing nature of outsourcing work, we need to think about how is the work of accountants going to be changing related to it, right? And so if technology is bringing about better processes and a focus on higher value add activity, we need accountants to be able to scale to alter what they're doing so that rather than doing processing work, they're doing value add activities, right? And the technology also needs to change how we do business, and so focus on the customer, right? How often have you heard people, consultants come in and they try and sell you what they've got on the truck, right? Oh, I've got these 3 great pieces of software and I've got these solutions, and which do you want to buy, right? More and more what you need to do is to sit with someone and say, well, what are your issues, right? What's your problem? Let me sit and go through what your big pain points are. Let's do a design thinking session and let's figure out what the solution is. And then if I've got something that's appropriate, I can help. Else, maybe something else is more appropriate. So that's the next one. Ask the CFO or CIO what their pain points are. The next one is culture. Culture is so important, right? And that's any company, right? So to be truly agile and focus on real problems, real value, to be trusted and transparent, right? You need to have the right culture. People need to know they can respect, trust you, and work with you, and vice versa. And then the final one here is embrace change, right? And invest in it wisely, and be decisive, act with assurance. Else, by the time you spent 6 months agreeing that you need to get extra staff to run a particular project, you'll be 6 months behind your competitor who did it on day one. Okay. So I'm giving an example here. This is an IBM example, and it's called cognitive FP&A. So financial planning and analysis. I know we've got a lot of people here who deal with FP&A. And the problem is, how do you deliver insights to clients? And they're things like, what do we expect is going to happen? What's going to drive changes? How do we respond? Right? We've got algorithms coming in, machine learning. We've got self-learning. We've got cognitive. What can we do? And so cognitive forecasting, and I'll give you an example on the next slide, is that a financial controller can actually see the future, right? Our extraordinary financial controller. Because what happens is they can see what the impact of what their competitors are doing, and they can take in all the available data, and they can then act to change it. So I think it's on the next slide, but I'll say it now. There's a pharmaceutical client, right? We like pharmaceutical, right? So pharmaceutical client that had a particular product, and they were forecasting the sales of that product with something like 80% accuracy. So they changed it and had an artificial intelligence cognitive solution put in place, right? Cognitive FP&A was the solution. And it went from 80% to 99% accuracy. Okay, that was large units, not billions of small value units. It was small value of high volume units. But that one change, moving it from 80 to 99%, gave an $115 million potential incremental profit over 2 years. So using that as an example that we know has been proven, what now people need to do is expand that out and see what other areas it can tackle. So it may be that you've got a much bigger chance where chance of not succeeding as well, where you've got maybe a lower value product that you've got a much larger volume of, and that's far more difficult to figure out, rather than something that's more specialist and you've only got certain variables to play with. But guess what? Artificial intelligence does what? Learns over time. I knew you were going to say that, right? So it learns over time and it makes better results because it's basing its recommendations on the data it's receiving, and it's always receiving new data and refining its recommendations. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to blockchain. Who's been waiting for me to talk about blockchain? Oh, thank you. Yes, I can see it. Two hands up in the room. Rest all smiling. So blockchain. The good news is a lot of people exploring blockchain expect it to support their enterprise strategy. 2/3 intend to adopt a platform. Read the slide, right? People expect it's going to add value. The question is it? Well, it's starting to, right? If you look at, I'll use an example. IBM were working with a company called Walmart. You might have heard of them. It's a small grocery chain, or at least smaller today than they were a few days ago. So what they did was they looked at tracing mangoes and pork and what have you. And I'll say it's a mango as an example. So say a big cost to the industry at the moment is that you have an outbreak and somebody gets sick and they say, oh, it was that mango, that piece of chicken. And so what they do is they go back and they say, oh God, pull back everything, throw it away. Well, what if you could trace that individual piece back to where it came from, to the farm it came from, see where all the produce from that farm went, and just take out that piece, right? You could save millions of dollars. So food safety is an issue, and it's funny because even though people compete against each other, the Krogers, the Walmarts, of this world, there's about, I don't know how many it is now, but a whole bundle of them came together to work on the same issue, because for them it's the same problem, and even though they compete against each other, nobody wants really to get hit by a multi-million-dollar recall, because it could happen to anyone. So people are now working together on a common food safety solution. If you look at the IBM Twitter feed on blockchain, you'll see a lot of articles on that recently. I've been forwarding some around, and it's still relevant. And that's one example of what blockchain can do. It can also do things, well, it can do, it's a block in a chain, trusted, seamless. Oh, let's go to the next slide. I think, next slide. There we go. Right, so, oops, went back too far. So the case study, I was going to use a case study for IBM Global Financing. Oh, I lost the, can you see? I've lost the PowerPoint. Hang on a second. Bear in mind for a second. Bear with me, I don't know what's happened to the, hang on, I have to come out and restart it, so bear with me for a second, everyone. That's not good. I seem to have a, oh, just thinking about it. Daniel, can you do me a favor and pull up the PowerPoint? I might need to switch to your machine. Yeah, I seem to have something conflicting. Yeah, I can say. So, Sasha, can you do me a favor and can you switch the presenter to Daniel? And he's going to pull this up, and then I'll carry on talking to it, because I think I need to reboot my machine to reactivate. I don't really want to do that in the middle of a presentation. So I knew it was a good idea to have a second machine in the room at the same time, just in case. Can you just make yourself presenter? No, you can just press the slides. It's fine. Oh. Oh, it's okay. I've got it back. Oh, interesting. I think PowerPoint just rebooted itself. Does anybody else have that happen to them? Yeah, let me just start this up again. How do I? I've got the little bar at the moment, and I can't see where to press that. Hang on a second. Oh, Daniel, are you presenting or? No, I'm just stuck with that. Yes. Maybe we switch to you.
Yeah, show screen.
Yeah. Yeah, can we switch to you, and I just put yours up there and I'll talk through it because the webcam is still operational, right? I think they can cope with, well, no, they'll see the PowerPoint because Sasha make you the presenter. Sasha, can you hear? I don't know whether Sasha's still on or if we've lost anybody, to be honest, but. That's okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, can you go ahead to the slide that's on? I want to check. Sasha, can you confirm that you can hear us still? I'm concerned that we've lost the audience. That's all. Are you getting anything on the chat?
Hi, everybody. It's Sasha. I can hear you. David, you're still loud and clear.
Thanks for bearing with me. Normal service will be resumed as soon as possible. I should do it. Okay. Yeah, well, I was moving to a wrap actually, but I wanted to get to the last slide. So thanks for all bearing with me. If you want, we can just go through the PowerPoint and I can just talk to it because people have probably got it up on the screen. What I don't know is if people are still seeing me on the webcam or not.
David, it's Sasha. Can you hear me? You're still on the webcam.
Oh, excellent. So thanks for bearing with us, guys. We're going to get there in a second. We're going to go a few minutes over, but hopefully you can see the screen now. If you're seeing Daniel's screen, tell you what, so go past that one because we'll get to an end. I mean, where I was going, we talked a little bit about accounts payable and reduction in costs. You can read that. So let's go past that one. It's the next slide I want. Okay, so to wrap on blockchain, you should now be on slide 22. And if you're with me still, thank you so much. So blockchain for business, there's 4 things I want to point out here, right? One is, if you look at the key concepts, this is what blockchain is about, right? You've got a shared ledger. That means everybody accesses the same ledger, right? You've got permissions. So everybody's got the same visibility into transactions. They're secure, they're authentic, they're verified. You've got a smart contract. So business terms are embedded in the transaction database and executed with the transaction. Think what that means for lawyers. I think accounting's got a problem with what blockchain is going to do. Just think about the legal profession and what a blockchain-based legal smart contract solution could do to minimize contracts going back and forth to be resolved. And finally, consensus. All parties have to agree for things to move forward. So it works where you have trust, right? Next slide. Because I told me it was 50 minutes and I wanted questions. So trust and transparency. Again, I've been through that before. You can go back and you see from blockchain, like the analogy I used, you can go back and see where something was created, go right back to the source and fix that mango that was bad and just the field that it came from rather than the entire country. Right? Next slide. And this is one slide before the wrap slide. So when there's great power, there's great responsibility. I like that quote because it's about artificial intelligence, and it's, again, the purpose of artificial intelligence. Does anybody know what that is? Somebody help me. Yeah, I know it's, I was hoping to get another voice coming into play. You're very quiet, right? So it's to augment human intelligence, right? And data, know your own data, know who's trained the AI you've got looking at it, and you need to support and you need to develop new skills. So if you can move to the next slide, and this is the final one here before I move to the Q&A slide, is think about three things, right? The future of finance as we embrace it today. We're looking to embrace technology to help us create better trusted insights. We want to protect our enterprise viability. So if you're working for a company and you're not embracing this stuff, how long are you really going to be around if your competitors are, right? And also you want to deliver efficient finance operations. And by that, I don't mean automated finance operations. I mean finance operations where you also have best practices and improving best practices. So it's continual improvement. World-class organizations will need finance as a strategic partner, and we need to set the example as a profession. That's where I'm going with the skills of the accountant being tied to this. If you move to the next two slides on, that's a thank you. This final, so we now said thank you and we're on Q&A, by the way. This last slide is one I'm putting up at the end to try and encapsulate the whole thing. If I put it up at the beginning, you might go, oh my God, what's that? And you may still do that, in which case, thank you for having stayed with me this long and through all the ups and downs of the presentation. But if you look here in trying to say you've got disruptors, you've got threats, you've got at the top right-hand corner, as you mature as a leading organization, you want an optimal finance solution. And if you take into account a number of things on this slide, that's where you end up. So with that, Daniel, I'm going to stop the presentation and I'm opening up for questions. And if you can give me a time check, that would be helpful.
Sure. So we're actually 5 to 7.
So that's 50 minutes.
Yes. If you, for the Q&A, just stay close to your computer because it's easier to hear. We do have a few questions. Sasha, can you remove me as presenter? Okay. So,
or you can just ask from the room here. I know you've been saving up questions.
So if no one does have a question.
No, they know it's being recorded. That's why they're not saying anything.
I have a couple questions actually. They're up on the screen. A couple questions from some guys on the chat. But before those, I had a question. You were mentioning how the technology changes, where to the point where the skills need to change. The CFO becoming the chief analytics officer, and the auditors are becoming, or put it this way, the robots are going to become the auditors, and the auditors are going to need to be something else. Technology moves quicker than we can, people can change their skill set, or that educational institutions can churn out professionals with different skills. How quickly do you think things will change to the point where the accounting profession has evolved that dramatically to the point where you've described a few use cases here?
Well, it's happening, right? So every institute, at least the institutes I've been talking to, recognize this, right? It's not like they're saying we're fine, So they're looking at it. They're trying to figure out what they do with their own curriculums and how they train people. I don't know what will happen. All I know is that discussion is going on. If you take NASBA in the US, for example, who do the CPA exams, we work very closely with NASBA, and they're looking at their whole training and how they can do things. And again, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but let's say, for example, we all did how long, 3-4 years it took to qualify as a chartered accountant, postgraduate, right? I mean, one thing, what if people did a basic 2-year learn to be an accountant course, and then you had specialist modules, right? And then if another module came up like blockchain, you could do a 3-month course for a credit so you can get certified that you've got a good enough understanding to be able to explain to people what that means and what the impact could be. I mean, there's a whole bundle of ways it goes, but I think that educational institutions have got an opportunity here to grow out and augment what they already do by adding in things that help certify people and give them credibility along with their basic qualification to move forward. Now, that may not answer the question here, and it may not be what people do. It's just an example of what could be done. And all I can say is that those discussions are going on. We're actually going to have a meeting next week in New York and we've got Sasha is arranging for people to be filmed to talk about what's the impact of skills on accountants. Sasha, what I'm asking you to do is if you can actually add that question into the mix that we're going to be asking the CEOs of our various institutes next week, then maybe we can put that up on our website after next week, and whoever's interested can go and watch the video.
Thank you. So another question, and this one probably is what you thought you were answering and didn't really, but the question is how do accountants in business learn about such things? Will the institutes facilitate such information, and hopefully we can get that point across?
It's happening. I mean, so I don't know if people know about IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, right? Everybody here can sign up and get information from them. All you've got to do is sign in with your email address, right? Now they've got a whole load of good collateral online. They even got a video of me speaking of something, right? So it must be good, right? So my point there is that IFAC last year, they've got a professional accountants in business group that pull people from multiple industries, be it oil, be it telecoms, whatever, and they pull them in and they have them feedback on what's the future, what skills are needed, you know, what are the things they're looking at. And that was the workshop that I was working with them on last March, right? And they've met since, and what they do is they periodically issue updates on what the discussions are about, very open, right? So if you're in business and you're wondering what people in business are thinking, that's one of the channels to monitor, is just to look at what the people who are connected with IFAC are saying about what they are doing, right? And IFAC has got multiple committees. It's not just got professional accountants in business, it's got ethics, it's got the Forum of Firms, which is all the big professional accounting bodies like the Big Four, etc. And they all come together, and this is what they're talking about. I know that's not a perfect solution, but that's part A, and part B is to your institute should be feeding you as well, right? Some of the institutes here are taking an active, if you look at the Institute of Management Accountants in the US, right, they've actually gone to market aggressively with pushing out things about artificial intelligence and saying how you can future-proof your career by becoming having their qualification, because they're ensuring that their members are kept up to date, right? If they're doing that, you can bet that most other institutes are doing something similar to some degree, right? Because we have to.
Perfect. We have a question about the difference between machine learning and intelligence automation. Can you say a few words on that?
Well, I said a few before. I don't want to recap what I said, but so to my mind, so machine learning is where
3 words or less.
Well, intelligent automation is where you've got all that understand, learn, engage, two-way communication back. Machine learning doesn't necessarily have all those pieces the way I understand it. It's where you've got a machine, it learns and it does something and it comes back and does it again. I don't think it's got the depth and the breadth that artificial intelligence does. However, you could define that a different way and prove me completely wrong, right? So I think what you need to remember is whether you call it machine learning or call it artificial intelligence, it's that you've got automated processes that have different degrees of a learning and recommendation capability, and we're pushing the boundaries of those at the moment, but we're not there yet, right? So what you can do is look for use cases that are examples, and that one might be where a machine learns to do something as part of an audit process versus where a machine is responding to you because you're asking to buy a new coat, and it's asking you questions to refine the search and recommend a solution based on past data sets it's seen. I know that was more than 3 words, wasn't it?
Is there a security framework for cognitive technology?
That's a good question. So there's an ethical framework. Security, I would say, is a separate topic, right? Not because it's part of everything, right? Security is what stops the bad guys getting into your system or getting access to stuff. And so it's the security around the platforms you're using that is important. And so let's call that cyber security. That's where I was saying earlier that security around cloud applications, given the biggest risk is usually somebody who works for the actual organization, is probably better. But I've also seen that the standards of security increased dramatically. I did a project several years back, and the cloud-based solution had far better security than the client's on-premise solution. I mean, they were both good. It's just the cloud was had an even higher barrier to get through. Now, whether that answers the question, I'm not sure, but I would separate security out and say that it's something that affects everybody. It's not just artificial intelligence, it's everything you do, anything where you've got technology involved.
Is it likely that the accountancy profession might team with a data management company or develop its own AI division?
I think they are. I mean, if you look at, so IBM isn't an accounting company, but it bought PwC's consulting arm, right? It's got its own AI development stuff. Accenture, they're doing their own development stuff. Yes, they were a consulting company linked to Arthur Andersen in the past, obviously, but they're not now. The big four, well, I'd be surprised if they're not. I'm pretty sure that all the big accounting firms are looking at audit and how to enhance that, so they may have a need for a specific application. I also think that they'd be more likely to partner with somebody who may have that expertise to buy in the piece they need, but I can't say. So that's the best I can answer it.
Okay, so maybe one last question. We're 2 minutes past 7. So
okay, one last question. Make it a nice, easy one.
In order to stay competitive and utilize AI, are we going to be forced into large ERP systems like SAP, Oracle, etc., or do you see that smaller accounting systems will also be able to offer AI solutions?
Ooh, okay, so I get the question, but I would divorce it, right? Because AI is not really anything to do with an ERP or an accounting system. AI is based on data sets. So yes, SAP, Oracle may have AI. I mean, Oracle's all over cloud at the moment, but it's whatever data set you've got. So whether that data set is from JD Edwards or Oracle Financials or SAP or Sage or QuickBooks, it's the data set that's important, because the artificial intelligence is going to learn based on the data it is fed, right? That's about it. Any questions from anyone in the room before we close? We've got one. So there are people here, just to let those of you watching from home. Well, last question.
So in the instance when a few some money was stolen from Bitcoin or one of the Bitcoin.
Okay, so money was stolen from Bitcoin.
What went wrong in the one of the diagrams that we put up there on blockchain? What went wrong with the verification?
If I could answer that, I wouldn't be standing here now. What went wrong and why were they able to steal the money? That I can't answer, but it's a good question. I'm sure there's a lot of people looking at that because it cost people millions and millions and millions of Bitcoins, right? But no, I think that comes more around to the question before about security. You've got to really figure out your security and the access points, and there's always going to be people getting around access, right? So I can't tell you what went wrong because I don't know the details. I just read the headlines. So that's it. So with that, I think we'll say thank you. We've been an hour, so I wanted to wrap in just under an hour so that we got a chance of somebody looking at this online rather than going, oh God, it's David talking for 3 days. So thank you so much. I welcome comments back from anyone at home. If you've got any questions, please feed them through because Daniel's going to pick them up with Sasha and collate them, and we will get back to you on the ones that we can answer anyway, or the ones I can answer anyway. So thank you so much, and have a great evening. And now we're all going to go to the pub.